Коллеги, давайте...
Dear colleagues, let us start. We will continue working with our intense program on robotics, and now we are going to discuss the tasks and objectives of developing robotics industry in Russia. And I would like to introduce myself. I'm Alisa Konyukhovskaya. I'm the head vice president of the Russian Association of Robotics, and now we have a meeting together with the Ministry of Industry and Trade, and we're going to discuss how to develop the industry of robotics. It's going to be an open dialogue, and we have a number of presentations we will show to you, and we will discuss what is going on in our industry, and we welcome you to participate in the dialogue, because it's not the business of separate organizations, it's the business of everybody who is on the market. We should do it together. We will start with an introductory word from the official public figures from the ministry, and then we will share the results of our research about the development of the robotics industry, and there will be presentations on the laboratory of robotics from Sberbank and Innopolis Competency Center, and then we will discuss what we're going to do further to develop the robotics industry. And now I pass the floor to Vladimir Dazhdev, Acting Director of Digital Technologies Department. Good morning, dear colleagues, and I wouldn't want to steal time from the speakers who are more specific on their subjects and are ready and capable of telling you more interesting things. And I would like to repeat once again that service robotics is not one of the through current industries. It's not just an industry, it's a driver of sorts which entails development, the artificial intellect and unmanned driving vehicles, and lots of directions in radio electronics. So it's important that complex and comprehensive development of all industries was correlated with different branches and industries, with all the events which we have already planned as those of priority within the framework of the digital economy of the Russian Federation strategy, where our colleagues paid a lot of attention to robotics and radio electronics. We are on the stage of shaping several strategic documents. We are discussing the digital manufacture and the digital industry project within the framework of digital economy, which was ordered by the President of the Russian Federation, and to be more specific, to avoid hustle and bustle and to avoid creating some entities and things which are not on demand on the market. Together with our associations, we tried at the first stage to research what is really needed by the participants of the robotics industry, what they need in terms of mechanisms of interrelations with the state, with the government, on the measures of support and assistance which can be necessary. And we really hope that all of you participate in this discussion, and Alisa will give you more details on results we have achieved. What I would like to add on my own behalf is that we will receive your feedback, and we will receive your opinions, and we will use them in our work. We are not going to involve into empty verbiage, in empty words. We really would like to meet the challenges as aired by you. So the results of our research, of our questionnaires, will be used very specifically in our further work, and I think that my colleagues will give you more detail on what exactly they are doing. Thank you very much. Thank you for the introductory remarks, and we have had unexpected changes within the program. Half an hour before we started our roundtable, the Department of Agricultural Machine Building also prepared some presentation, and their representative is ready and willing to participate in our roundtable talk, and that is why we will start with their presentation. And the name of the speaker is Evgeny Korchevoy. Thank you, Alisa. Can we put on my slides? My presentation will be very brief, and Vladimir already mentioned the demands of the robotics industry, and I've got a separate task. I would like to demonstrate it from the perspective of agricultural machine building, how much your work is needed and how much your technologies change all machine building industries. So the first slide, please. Oh, thank you very much. Today, agricultural machine building has been developing very fast, and you see that it grew threefold within the last years, and we've achieved progress in terms of replacing imports, and we increased the Russian production from 24 to 50%, and we managed to do that because we refurbished our production lines and we installed completely new models of equipment and machinery, and we modernize our production lines and our manufacturing, and we keep improving the machines which are on high demand by the agricultural workers. And you know that agriculture right now is a high-tech industry, and competitiveness of our industry can be proven by the fact that our export has been growing by 10 billion this year. I'm saying that because we have the task to produce the high-tech products of the highest quality and not one iota lag behind from our major rivals in terms of agriculture. And our rivals are in Northern America and in the European Union. We are competing here with the most developed high-tech companies. We've developed our own strategy of manufacturing, and we have investments into our industry, and we create new workshops, we install new production lines, we have new facilities, and we have new plants built from scratch to produce modern agricultural machinery. And we approved of the strategy up until 2030, and the task is to increase the volume of production threefold. And you can see that the R&D share should increase tenfold, and we should increase the number of designers and workers dealing with R&D, both in producing machinery itself and in developing new technologies of manufacturing. And of course, digitalization comes to agriculture and agricultural machine building. Design, research and development of all this machinery goes in CAD systems, and the systems of organizing production are the most modern. And agricultural workers demand that we should produce more efficient, more reliable equipment with elements of precise agricultural techniques, with the opportunity to gather large amounts of data and make clever solutions. And from the viewpoint of manufacturing, we've noticed the fact that active robotics has been implemented in producing agricultural machinery. And the most interesting fact is that the driver behind that is not the cutting down on cost of production, no, because the salary of the workers and the wages of the workers consumes a large part of that, but a lot of robots go actually to agricultural facilities located in small cities, small towns, far away from metropolitan areas. And there is an evolution of involving robotics which replace non-existing workers, which, for example, welding operations, not only welding operations are taken by the robots, but even with mechanical processing and thermal processing, with packaging, we have robots working instead of people. And of course, our producers, 99% are private enterprises, and they are absolutely happy about robotics because they do not go on sick leave, they work 24/7. And the most important thing is that robots provide for the quality I've mentioned already, and the welding, for example, done by the robots either in Germany or in the United States, we have it of the same quality. And of course, our agricultural workers choose our equipment then. So we have such points of developing agricultural equipment, and there is Shebeka town not far from Ukraine in Belgorod area, and this facility was created from the start with the soil treating equipment, and there is the engineering center which is going to start its work tomorrow, and we have achieved all the necessary criteria set for that center, and they started from buying robots, and then they understood that it's very expensive and started designing robots by themselves. They bought spare parts and components and hired practitioners in robotics and programming, practical workers, and they understood it that the number of workers they need, they cannot hire them anywhere. They have to train them by themselves, and they created their own engineering center, and there are 3 blocks in their center. The first one is theoretical education, the second is programming education, and they will teach their own workers and workers of other companies, the companies which are interested in teaching their personnel, and the third block is welding in a specific environment, where in a specific atmosphere, when you can actually practice your skills. It's only one of the examples, and according to our forecast, within the next 5 years the number of robots will increase on our enterprises, and I demonstrated a very small example to you. The turnover of this enterprise is only 500 million rubles, and of course the number of such enterprises will go up throughout the country, and such enterprises are like Rostselmash or St. Petersburg plants with foreign participation. They transfer their production to robotics, and that is why your work, my dear colleagues, is very important, and we have to have Russian alternative, Russian machinery and Russian robots. And of course we together should put a lot of efforts into teaching an army of engineers in robotics, operators who can work with robots, and we can deal with this task together with our government. So you are praising the sanctions, right? Thank you so much for this interesting introductory remark, and let's go over to the presentations.
Our work together with the Department of Digital Technologies The report will be divided into 5 parts. First, comment on the modern contemporary situation, then to international market, how the leaders develop this market themselves, and in Russia, how development of the robotics in Russia is going on, and then we'll discuss further steps. Robotics is the 40% of robotics is in machine building, and we do not have our manipulators themselves, and we need manipulators, and we need people who may develop them, and effective productions with the use of technologies that would help reduce cost. The amount of this market is 2 billion rubles, which is a low level of any kind of localization. Service robotics is demonstrating the increase. We do not have common system of collecting data on robotics companies, and that's why we have definite difficulties, and we are ready to open these opportunities, and we see that the dynamics of sales of 10 companies is increasing, and the year 2017 compared to the previous year is by tenfold. mainly these are professional robots, and professional robots we have at the moment are educational robots, and they are mainly in the business sector. As for the expert in items of professional robots, it's about 27% of expert. We can increase and develop it further. And if we want to develop our robotics, we have to find the instruments to enter the external market. And these are the data for the Russian market on the amount of money and export, which are the basic prospective fields. First of all, robots for public places, Alpha Robotics and others. And development and the industrial robotics and medicine. These are three prospective fields. Logistics inside the buildings and outside buildings in agriculture. These are the technologies are being developed nowadays, and this will be commercialized in the future. There is a gigantic demand by the increase of 33%, and now there is a popular topic, and that robots take jobs from people, but we cannot cope with the personnel demand anyway. As for the countries that use robots, China, South Korea, US, and Germany, that buy robots, and they can work with these devices and they can install them. Industrial robots are concentrated in these countries as well. You will hardly see this kind of information anywhere, because not all companies have this kind of information. Japan, South Korea, and Germany. Service robots, the same countries, the same fields. Service robots. And this is mainly, to my mind, is approximate data, because not all companies can share the information with the international federation, or maybe they don't know that they can share this information, or they must do that. And here we see the leaders are the countries which have programs which are accepted a long time ago. For example, in South Korea, that they have a law on robotic development was accepted in 2008, and they are discussing these problems. They have been discussing these problems since 2001, and they have a plan for the development of robotics and on artificial intelligence, and all countries are doing a great job on developing robotics. And these are documents consolidating different state organs and institutions to develop this field internally. What we have in our country nowadays, we have two major fields, and it's a national technological initiative and digital economics. And the end-to-end technologies is uniting both of them. And this approach has some disadvantages. Because since there is information from above without understanding what are the demands and needs of this technology, and the documents that are discussing nowadays, they have very strict structure which develop these and these problems. We have this goal, but nowadays we have. I can't see any common ideas, and there are no key goals, and this information is hardly being discussed anywhere. And our meeting will be the basis for enhancing this key issue. Until recently, we saw very low involvement of the expert community, lack of cooperation between different cooperation institutions and development, and we didn't know that the Ministry of Agricultural Machine Building will join us today. Now we have approximately the same park that support robotics, but we do not have enough information on the results of the development of robotics for the last 5 years. On support of financial support, and what is the efficiency and what are the results? How can we cooperate and how can we refine instruments that to make them more efficient? And thanks to Vladimir Dazhdov and his department, we are doing this kind of work. Since we had this request from the Ministry of Trade, and we are uniting this information, analyzing it. We will publish it, and the Institute of Development asked us, we asked the Ministry to provide us with the information of the finances for the last 5 years, and how we will develop this robotics in the future. How can we develop the future steps, and how can we use this in the future? The problems that we faced when we collected the data, the Institute of Development cannot identify which companies are robot producing, and they cannot say that they support these companies, because there is no classification of marker special that would define these robot producing companies. There are some ideas on robots, but there is no service robotics as such. The results of our survey, there were about 50 participants with great experience in the industry, with high level of status and positions in the company. These are owners, proprietors, and top managers of these companies. Mainly, these were companies that specialize in digital technologies and robotics, program R&D, and other companies. This question was asked, which fields are more promising in robotics, and this answers we received from them, and each participant defended his or her point of view, and that we can hardly argue with that. We asked them if there is a necessity to develop the strategy of robotics, and all of them said yes. Almost all of them answer yes, and it's clear that if we do not follow this idea and we do not produce any documents to make some changes, the strategy might be one of these instruments. And then we asked the next question: for which period? Most responses were until 2024. In South Korea, there is strategies and plans that until for a different timeline, and for a shorter period of time. Which tasks should be allotted to the strategy? Cooperation between the participants, and now we have just talked to the South Korean partners, and they told us about the building and help prepare the demand, the request for robotic solutions. And I think that we can learn a lot from our foreign overseas partners. We also asked if we need the Center of Robotic Development. For example, in Korea, in South Korea, was established in 2010, and we received positive response for that. we asked what should be the basis and what functions should this center have, because we do not want to produce some new items, entities, and we need optimization of the resources we already have. And these functions that this center should have, the key factors were organization of events in robotics, production of conditions, popularization, and open market information of companies, Russian companies, and production of single window for all members of this field, and facilitation and these are main fields that should be, the center should be focused on the basis of the existing centers of development. Which should be, we asked the question, what should be the basis for this center, and 26% said that that this center should be based on the existing market players, on the state cooperation and the existing institute of cooperation, but 25% said that we should unite the member market players of this institute. We also asked the question if they used the measures of support, and only 20% said that yes, they used these measures, although 20% do not know about measures of support. The main measures which are used are grants, subsidies by state funds, and residency in Skolkovo, which are also grants. The question was which instruments should be used to develop the field. It said that tax help would be used by the sum of which was spent on purchase of robots. And encouraging banks and funds that finance and invest into robotics, organization of international conferences and exhibitions, attracting foreign organizations for participation, and in a popularization of robotics and so on. In general, there was a slide about further steps that looked like a plan, but we decided not to show it, not to demonstrate it, because we have to know the opinion of market players, market participants, to include them into this plan, and we do not want to limit ourselves to some framework, and we will discuss terms and conditions next, but we have to focus on cooperation between countries and market participants. We also had a question whether you would like to participate in questions of development of robotics, writing and strategy and measures of support. And there were about 20 to 30 participants willing to work on that. That's all about my presentation. I'm ready to answer your questions if you have.
Or we can proceed with the presentation. And now I will pass the floor to Albert Yefimov. He will share his ideas on developing robotics industry. Thank you very much. Yes, this is a very interesting research, Alisa, and I would like to ask the audience, that rebel who said that the strategies of developing robotics, who was against that, it's really a rebel. Maybe he is here, and I would like to meet this person. his opinion is very, very important. When one person says, no, we don't need such a strategy, when everybody else says, yes, we do need that, this is very important. Laboratory of Robotics of Sberbank was created on the 21st of August 2012, according to the decree of our president, and we are very similar to the engineering center, Yevgeny, you mentioned. But with the difference that we are a state corporations and we deal really with robotics, we actually work with robotics. And here is the slide with our analytic report. I would like to present it to my colleagues from the Ministry of Industry and Trade. This is the first research in Russia of the global markets of robotics, which is prepared not by a vendor but by a large analytic corporation. And secondly, it contains some recommendations what is to be done, and it defines what our fields are. We are honest about defining what robotics is, using different criteria. I do not know, maybe there are some people here who do not know me over here. I've been working for 7 years in Skolkovo, and then Sberbank asked me to launch another robotics and analytical center, and I could not reject that offer. So I'm in the same position. I just added more work to myself. It's not self-advertisement, it's just explaining what the Laboratory of Robotics of Sberbank is doing, so that you understand that first we use robotics to increase efficiency of work inside Sberbank. 80,000 tons of money we process every year. That is 20 kilograms per every worker in Sberbank. It's just a lot of money, and we decided to do it by ourselves. And the second thing we are doing, we are working not only for Sberbank, which is a market in itself. It's about 30% of the Russian market of robotics. But we work for the whole environment, the whole ecosystem in general. And there come people from Forbes list to our laboratory to get consultation. So we have this enlightenment function and consultative function for our clients from machinery building industry. This is a very important task, and it is on high demand. We also popularize education in terms of robotics. It's also very important. And I'm here with two hands. My first hand is my engineering team, and the second, my sonation team. We work with acceleration team, sorry. So we work with our own projects, and we work with accelerating somebody else's projects, and we have 75 of them. That's an industrial collaborative robotics, and our session with Koreans demonstrated that we believe in collaboration. We can call it differently, but basically collaborative robotics is the thing of the future. Service robotics can be of two types, logistics and everything else. Then drones, unmanned vehicles, and you may have heard about experiments of Sberbank with delivery, unmanned delivery means, but we have not excluded it from our field of work, although we are not very active. Then personal assistants, and we are one of the major clients of Promobot company, which is present over here, and industrial exoskeletons, which are also very important, and I think they are important for Ministry of Industry. They can turn low-tech jobs into high-tech jobs. This is an example of what we demonstrate at the shareholders' annual meeting. That's integration of several robots. That's a counting machine, and it grabs the objects, and we patent it over here. And then integration bus, which connects several robots together. There are physical kinetics system, and they're very safe for the humans. And as I said, there is also an engineering team, 13 engineers, including myself, but we are hiring more and more engineers, and I'm proud to say that we are the best engineers in Russia. And our status in Russia, the report by Association of Robotics said that we have 3,400 robots, and the association found 7,000 robots, and the sales increased twofold in comparison with 2016. And it's great news for everyone who deals with integrators and robots. But we're just at the beginning of a huge leap forward here in Russia, because judging from this pessimistic slide, we have achieved something, but I will give you more details about that later on. It's not all that bad about service robotics, as Alisa said, but I would like to draw your attention to the fact that Russia here is in between Spain and Sweden, and it's a nice geographic location. I would like to be physically between Spain and Sweden, and in terms of service robotics, we are on a very good European level, I would put it like this. And what Promobot is doing, their R&D work, is on a very good level globally. We have something to be proud of, and we have something to move forward with. And this statistical data does not reflect the fact that the state corporations started working with robotics, and there are startups demonstrated on this slide. Well, the dynamics is not that wonderful as it is shown, because last week our acceleration program was visited not only by startups. All of our clients from machine building complex came, and they said that I'm the head of laboratory of robotics of this and that company. All of them did such a thing, and it's very surprising. Next, as I've been working in Skolkovo for quite a while with this subject, we have accumulated some analytical data, and we conducted this overall analysis of robotics in Russia, and what it boils down to is SWOP methodology: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, problems. And why we think about success? We have a lot of talented engineers. According to our assessment, every year only robotics engineers and mechanics engineers, there are 800 engineers per year. Young engineers with bachelors, having a bachelor degree in that, and this is a huge number. No European country has a corresponding figure. And another strength of ours, we can resolve very difficult fundamental tasks. And you know such examples. And we have positive attitude in Russia to robots. It's very important. We have not invented Terminator, and our technocratic population is very positive towards robotics and technology. We have also weaknesses, and these 800 engineers produced every year are taught according to outdated programs. They cannot work with modern equipment. They have no equipment. They have no practical experience. And the number of robots in Innopolis and Skoltech, there are several robots, but the rest of our people work with very outdated robots, and they do not even understand the word collaborative robotics. The next weakness is the weak culture of entrepreneurship. Everybody wants to work for a large state corporation. Everybody wants to work in Sberbank, myself included. And this, well, it's a good thing that they do not want to work in the prosecutor's office, all of them. And we have also very poor design aesthetics. Everything which is produced in Bauman School, and I respect them very much, whatever they do, they receive a tank. They eventually produce a tank. And when we discuss service robotics, which is human-oriented, we should start with design. And I've seen my colleague Sergei Smirnov from industrial design, and we do a lot of things together. Another weakness is our migration policy. If we had a different migration policy, then robots would be cleaning our streets for many years by now. What opportunities we have? A growth of robotics market, and it's about 25% of production, and the rest is agriculture. It means that service robotics is the point of growth because it has no limitation. Industrial robotics, is growing due to Chinese demand. And if we switch off China, if we exclude China, that will be a plateau of the market. Then huge importance on GDP is produced by robotics, because it allows for more entities to work. There are less people, but more robots. And it's very important for our state, for our country, because improving efficiency, improving robotics, we can achieve that breakthrough our president talks of. We have a huge territory and not a lot of population, and it creates more opportunities for robotics. And here is a quotation: software is the world. And Alisa used to say that on the previous session, that our programmers is very strong. But every engineering difficulty can be resolved with programming, can be compensated by the program, and it allows us to enter the international market. And the service center, FinTech, I work with, is also a service center. What threats do we have? A deficit of qualified personnel. And the association presentation underrated it. I think it is a catastrophe, because we desperately need highly qualified engineers for reasonable salary. And then another limitation which concerns all of us. Foreigners work much faster. When we make a presentation about the project, the Chinese make the project itself. And then our talented engineers are concentrated in military-industrial complex. Up until very recently, it was robotics, not just robotics, but dual-use robotics. And thanks to the Ministry of Industry and Trade, we started understanding that robotics are needed not only for military-industrial complex. And then we have demonstrated it in our report as well. I try not to leave any stone unturned. I hope that everybody knows me. And the map of commercial usage of robotics, we have studied everybody who is doing what and who is working within our acceleration programs. You can see it over here that the industrial robotics is just a very small bit, and the service robotics is the rest of the picture. And variability of the companies which work in service robotics is huge, and it's very good news because very many good people are dealing with these technologies. Some words about China. I visited Beijing quite a while ago, and who visited China recently see a huge number of middle class. You go there and you see a lot of middle class, and it means that the investment cycle of robotics is switched on. The cost of a human being increased, and the payback of robotics decreased, and the Chinese market grew like tenfold in comparison with 2015, and the investment climate changed, and China became the hugest world market of robotics rather than cheap labor market. When we started robotics discussion in 2012 in Skolkovo in Russia, China at that time was not the global market for robotics, and while we still keep on talking, they became such a market, and Russia hit the bottom with robotics. The situation is worse only in Ukraine. And the Robotics Association did not mention this index, but that's the number of robots per 10,000 workers in industry. I think it's a very good indicator of maturity of the industry in the country, and I would highly recommend our country to make this indicator a macroeconomic one. In the world production, everything is just like on this chart about the density of robotization, and it's not very good in Russia. We have very good service industry. About 18% of Russian GDP is service economy and trade, and in this sense we should use towards increase of robotics density, and we will jump from 3 robots to 5, 6 robots by 10,000 workers. But the average world density is 74 robots per 10,000 workers. So we have a huge potential over here in terms of robotization. Robotization is inevitable because the competitiveness of industry completely depends on automation and robotics. We cannot go lower and lower and keep decreasing the wages and salaries to our workers. The major engine of promoting Russian economy is financing and trade. I work in the financial organization, and it's also service robotics, logistics robotics and collaborative robotics. But there is another good news. In these industries, the potential from robotization is going to be very significant for Russia. First, it's nuclear industry. That's multi-million-dollar industry, because everything which was built in the 50s, in the 70s, we should break it down and we should dismantle it and we should replace it with new nuclear power plants. And it's very relevant for Europe and other problems. And colleagues from Rosatom and Elisa will prove that, yes, we should do that. And then aviation industry, it's the least robotized industry because of high precision. Airbus is conducting the very first tests of using robots. And the same concerns shipbuilding industry. And thank you, Evgeny, for agricultural industry. It's also the least robotized industry. And of course, I would like to make a comment. You said that your rivals are North America. No, they do not have a single native robot producer in North America. They use robots produced by somebody else, and they're very happy about that. Then mining industry, which is very strong in Russia, and robotization is inevitable over there. Some of you may know when there was shale oil crisis in the United States and the number of drilling rigs decreased immediately, then the number of drilling rigs increased, but the number of workers decreased. It means that on one drilling rig there are 2-3 people working, as opposed to a decade ago when there were dozens of people working there. And here is the tendency I would like to emphasize once again, collaboration, which goes to automobile building industry, to large-scale industries, and the leader in robotization in robotics in Russia will be the demand on small-scale businesses and medium-sized businesses. Then robotics should be as a service rather than a market. It's not sexy, if I may put it like this, to sell robots, especially for the next 50 years. We should lease robots, we should rent robots. For service economy, it's a more appropriate model, and Russia has no choice rather than follow that trend. Convergence of industrial robotics and service robotics. This February, on the expert session of Shunk company, we had this conversation that within a decade we will not be talking about separately about industrial robotics and service robotics. It will be the same technology. And I've already mentioned that logistics robotics and service robotics, concerning logistics and everything, these things are very important. And the measures of state support, which I thought very important. Education is of huge importance, and I do not understand why we should not follow the example of developed countries and accept sabbatical leaves. So we preserve the working place, we preserve the job and the salary of, for example, a teacher who goes away to teach at industry or work in industry. It will increase the level of our education. People who have the competencies, the motivation, they should have the opportunity to teach, and nobody is going to teach right now because the salaries are incredibly low in teaching. Next, in implementing robotics, for example, if the enterprise cuts down on the costs with buying robotics, they should have tax exemptions. This is a measure which is already used in several countries to stimulate development of robotics. And in the case if the enterprise receives a patent and earns because of the licensed patent technologies, we should give them tax exemptions as well. Then we should give subsidies for implementation of robotics. In many cases, people do not implement robotics because they had not received consulting. They bought the robot, but they cannot use that robot. They do not understand how to use this robot. And subsidizing these consultation would be a very good use. They use the same things in France. They spend large sums of money for that. And also, we should create roadmaps for using robotics. Even if that person who disagrees with the implementation of robotics, we will be able to persuade him. And the last thing the state should do is finance our community. What our community should do, we should work out a roadmap of development robotics, and I agree with the 26% who said that yes, it should be done with the robotics community. We should conduct annual International Robotics Forum. We conduct such robotics forum in Skolkovo, and it's a good platform, and it can become one of the platforms. But it's overheated right now. We should need other opportunities, and we should need a national award for popularization, for the best practices, for the best education practices, for the best things achieved in this industry. And we need to work out the best cases, scenarios of implementing robotics in industry. So all the methods and ways of using robotics should be accumulated in some database. And of course, there should be some educational retraining, re-educational program for new personnel, because we do not know what should be done with the people who lose their jobs because of the robotics. Because within the next decades, about 14% of personnel will lose their jobs. And we do not know for sure how to employ them. And Mr. Zemtsov in Russia demonstrated in his research that 42 million people can be replaced in Russia. It's basically all the jobs in Russia. So we have to understand how to retrain, how to re-educate these people. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your presentation. You are very positive. Can we ask you from the on behalf of the community? I think everybody will support me. If Sberbank is talking about the state support and stimulation, and I don't know, can we use your lobbying powers to stimulate, to encourage robotics, service robotics? It's a personal request. Roughly speaking, for example, offer the percentage on the credit 0%, for example, as it is being done for instruments for digitalization. Maybe Sberbank may look at that at the national level and become a driver of development, a point of development, and all departments and ministries might support that. Of course, I agree with you. I would say that in some aspects we have looked into this problem. The only thing is that the previous slides Sberbank was included in the Institute of Development. We are a commercial company which works on the income of shareholders. Please do not mix us up with the Institute of Development. Our task is to collaborate together, not to help, but to collaborate and do some robots together. Alisa, I would like to ask you not to put his presentation as number one, because after him it's very difficult to present anything. And there was a special site with a bottom, and you know the joke about when you reach the bottom, somebody would knock from behind. Jokes are jokes, but yesterday I visited some events on new materials that was organized by Ministry of Industry and Trade, and I observed a very interesting event, a phenomenon that where a professional community together with Ministry of Trade set up. New materials and robotics are very similar. And there were big problems because nobody wanted to invest into new materials and to the development of new materials. What Ministry of Industry and Trade did first, when they agreed with the professional community to make this community to be a guarantor of producing new production, new materials, and the guarantee that people would buy these materials, provided that the quality is high and they shouldn't buy anywhere else. And the ministry would compensate, would reimburse 50% of investment. And these two steps brought to the fact that they involved members of the community into this process. I was very surprised and shocked, culturally shocked, and this works. I'm sorry if I said something wrong, but if we could make something similar to work out, because the main problem is how to involve people, how to involve real sector into creations, development of production and promotion. And there are lots of risks, mainly political risks in the Russian Federation, and nobody wants to take them. And in this case, Ministry of Industry and Trade made these risks very evident, and they are not endless. Thank you for comment, and we have to face the problem of creating demand and request. Where everything is, robotics is the industry where everything is, but the consumers are not ready. The technology is not on the high level. Yes, it's a headache how to make the worker of the factory, how to change the production at the moment when they are on the bridge of survival. And there are also problems with personnel as well. I'm sorry, I don't want to go into the trap of bad follow-up that and speak about risks that prevent us from moving together. Each of us can make these lists. I want us to try to accept the experience that is working together with the state, or maybe to work out our own together with the state. As Albert said that very well, together with Albert. We have to work out these steps together. And the main conclusion from this event will be our cooperation, and we hear each other. It's a unique chance for us. I want to leave everything I wanted to say behind and just leave one point, whether you are aware of what your colleagues have done and whether you are ready. I would like you to enlighten us on that. I'm sorry, there is another very important part that might happen the next step. We have been talking about different measures, and we understand these measures, but the step that should be done by the community is to start talking about with the ministry and using their own language, and about the efficiency and what kind of benefits it will bring to the budget. All those tax relief measures that can be beneficial. For example, taxes might be reduced by the amount of finances that were spent on buying the robots or other measures. And we have to talk about the effects in 10-15 years and how these measures will help to enrich the budget. In South Korea, had this experience after the law on robotics was passed in 2008, and what kind of impact it had on the internal gross national product, and what kind of results we might have in our country. Dmitry Kapishnikov, the director of KUKA. Alisa, it is not correct to use the term community about talking about the robotics. Maybe state institutions should think about the income and efficiency. May I comment on that? Unfortunately, I don't agree with Zurab. Who is talking about risks in the face of Russia. I'm a patriot and a citizen of this country. I'm sorry, I'm a Georgian, and I didn't talk about hatred or love. Please be correct about that. We are not talking about patriotic feelings. I'm not against that. Zurab, just a second. What kind of thing we have here? When we talk about the community, I visited, was presented at the conference in Germany, Shunkovsky conference, which is held twice a year. And we had top experts on robotics, and there was no Angela Merkel or anybody else from the politics in Germany. Robotics is being developed in Germany without political involvement. In Russia, robotics is not being developed because there is no attention of the government. I partially agree with you, but we have to look at the other side of the coin. The community should talk by themselves, and we have to make our voice clear. We shouldn't sit on the shoulders of our Russian government. Of course, we can talk about government subsidies, but there are a lot of projects like that. And I should say that everything is in the hand of the community, and a community is very important for us. I would agree. Are there any other topics? I would like to make a comment on the work that is being done with us and abroad. We created an initiative on robotics and aggregate techniques to create some common database about the supporting measures, facilitating measures, which can provide for us ideas of experience and use some database already developed. And we can pass over to the next presentation about the competence center of Innopolis. And I'm ready to leave this presentation behind, and I would like just to talk to discuss major issues, because I'm ready to discuss burning points.
I'm not from a ministry, whether I like it or not. I'm from an industry of robotics, from machine building industry, where we use robots and automation means. And I would like to say the following. Albert, in his presentation, highlighted a very interesting thing about the state support measures. We should not be asking for money from the state. We should not be asking for money for investments. The state will decide what they're going to invest in, whether they subsidize or help building new nuclear power plants or icebreakers. They will assess their own needs. And what we do, even industrial robotics, in our understanding, is more of a service robotics. What do I mean by that? We actually not generate more efficiency or more production, more manufacturing. We do not produce 3 times more things rather than we used to. No, we are just applying patches. We're trying to make up for the inability of enterprises to do what they have to do. We're not increasing our levels of production. We are not entering the global markets with our services or with our ships or with any other vessels. So robots right now are used not because we need them actually, but despite this. And as Albert demonstrated that for Russia, the density of using robots is much, much lower because we do not have economic effect from that. And my personal opinion is that we just don't have enough personnel, and that is why we have to use robots. And that was a very good highlight from the presentation of Albert, that if the state, instead of subsidizing, makes tax exemptions for generating production with the help of robotics, then all the enterprises will become interested in using robotics. They will not keep on hunting for employees, which we lack anyway, and the state will stimulate the enterprise in such a way, instead of saying, you need TechNet, you need robots. No, being a businessman, I should be capable of deciding by myself whether I need a robot or not. And if I have tax exemptions, if I have some profits, if I do not have to pay the robot for a sick leave or something, then I will be buying more and more robots. But instead of thinking global things, let's make some decrees or orders that you as a corporation should produce 500 robots. No, such a decree won't work. Thank you. As a follow-up of this thought, I would like to focus on this issue. It's very important to define what we're talking about. We've been trying to define robots, but we have not defined the robotics industry of Russia. Even during the work of our association, we have not defined, well, I'm not talking about the number of participants, like, for example, Sberbank as a participant, and we are happy about that, but we have not defined who is the participant. And the density of robots using in Russia can be 0, and I could be happy as a Russian citizen if we have 0 robots in our country, but if we have robots in other countries. So we may produce robots for other countries, and it will be a brilliant example if we create such a robotics industry, and they will be used not in Russia but somewhere else. Well, okay, maybe we don't need those robots in agriculture and service economy, and right now we export our robots, and it's a very good result. We have to define for ourselves where we would like to go, into robotization of Russian industry and economy, or into selling robots to other countries. And it's also a very good thing, but these are 2 very different objectives to be resolved by different measures, including measures of state support. So we should define for ourselves what we are doing. Other countries follow the path of robotization, others it is of no importance how many robots we bought within the country. It's more important to sell robots outside the country. And thank God our robots are on high demand abroad, on a higher demand abroad rather than they are in Russia. Thank you for your comment. And in the documents of South Korea and in documents of China, there are points that we develop robotics for the benefit of the Korean or Chinese society. They set domestic objectives, domestic tasks to increase. If they do not speak about increasing, for example, efficiency. Yes, I accept this comment, but dear colleagues, please do not overlook this fact that we have the so-called fog of war created by all these documents, and I'm just trying to explain it clearly. We should not just create robots for the Russian market, which is 2-3% of the global market. We should create robots competitive on the global market. Vitaly Nedelsky, can I add a small comment? Yes, we are talking about creating a new industry, which is a multi-branch industry, which will be a driver for other industries, just like aeronautics and space programs were driver for other industries. It is a driver for new service platform, for creation new materials, and from the viewpoint of taxes, it is more promising rather than if we focus on forceful robotization of our jobs. So if the enterprise loses workers, they will have to install robots. And the only limitation here is their own output, their own manufacturing capacities. But if we help companies to create clusters for disseminating these technologies, for producing some internationally competitive products, that is the future of our industry. And when the prices for oil and gas again drop down, that will be the driver of our economy. Zverkov Maxim, Budget Company. I would like to butt in and would like to address our robotics community and address Alexander. I know perfectly well how to work with the ministry and in the ministry, and we talk about aid and assistance, but as a robotics community, we do not want to do anything for that. I will try to make this case clear and simple. If the ministry understands, it works like a bank. If they understand how they can get their money back, they will support that. They should understand how they can get their money back, and they will not do it instead of us. We are discussing it, we have been discussing it for quite a while, the means of assistance, the supporting of integrators and robotics, and it's not the association itself. The members of associations should actually formulate their suggestion. For example, give us 2 billion rubles and we will pay you back in so many years by these taxes or these profits. We will do it so and so. And I understand perfectly well how the department can discuss giving out subsidies and grants. And so far we've been using empty words like let's subsidize, let's support. If we really need such support, we should come to the Ministry of Industry and Trade and say, give us 2 billion rubles on these and these conditions, and in 10 years you will receive such taxes and such profits. And we should be very precise about that, rather than indulge in empty verbiage, which will end in nothing. That's my opinion. Thank you. We accept your appeal. Maybe I didn't say what I exactly meant. I was trying to say that we should not ask for many things from the state, from the government, and we've known each other for quite a while, and you know what I think, that development of robotics is an evolutionary process which cannot be really governed. And the enterprises themselves will have to understand that sooner or later. And thank God we have new instruments and approaches and tools to use in robotics. And what I liked in Albert's presentation, there was that line about taxation on usage of robots. And I think it's a small part in our taxes, and the state even will not notice these taxes because of the low number of robots we have. But it will be like a litmus test that will demonstrate it to the business owners, to the manufacturers of products. They will understand that it's an incentive to use robots, and it won't be an incentive for the state. It will be an incentive for those who have doubts whether they use robots or not. You know perfectly well that no ministry, no state department, even if you threaten it with capital punishment, they will not give you subsidies like that for nothing. Mr. Dazhdyov will never be able to protect such things. Why should we discuss such things at all? Let's be realistic. Let's understand how, as a state, we should accumulate some technologies and how we should enlarge the number of taxes, or, well, the amount of taxes gathered, and they will never subsidize purchasing of foreign robots. Yes, I agree with you. We've been discussing it for about 5 years, and it's an empty conversation. Yeah, we should have aid and assistance, and I agree with the vendors that we should support integrators and Russian companies which do something and work out solutions here. Because yes, the robotics market is 2-3%, but it's the Russian intellectual property. I'm sorry, we seem to be deviating from the subject. On all our events of association, we've been talking that yes, we should do something, but today we try to use international practices, and in some countries, for example, the state takes taxes, imposes taxes on the enterprises which use robots instead of people. And the situation is just the opposite in our country. We have no regulation and no understanding about robots in industry. If we make a U-turn and change the situation, and the Minister of Industry and Trade said that in Germany and some other countries, enterprises have to pay taxes if they use robots instead of people. But, well, I heard that from the minister himself. And if we have a problem with using robots, let's just make a U-turn. Let's change the situation completely. I'm not asking for money from the government as a vendor or anybody else. If the industry is going to develop, that will be good for all of us. As a comment, I used to work on both sides of the barricade, and I understand that the state has two important functions. The first one is security in the widest possible sense of the word. And we need to have competencies in the country, competencies of creating robots and programming them, and working out robotics solutions so that we avoid such a dangerous situation, such a dangerous dependence of our economy. And the second part is creating new businesses, and they should grow. And that's the share of the pie which is going to increase like 1,000-fold within the next 10-15 years. There will be no more oil and gas, which is 60-70% of our GDP, and oil gas prices are not going to rocket up. But you are in the new industry, you are growing, you're in the future. So what do you think about that? Thank you, Vitaly. Yes, I've been sitting here, and people are prodding me into action, asking whether I have nothing to say. I've got actually many points to mention, and I made those points when Albert was making this presentation. Well, everybody can criticize Albert, but nobody can replace me. Well, I know where your solutions are working, not only in Sberbank. So let's see, Sberbank. Well, we are not talking about Sberbank. The key story which promotes the development of robotics. And as for our vision, for our potential, yes, we are selling robots to 18, 20 countries in the world. And in those countries, they have the same conversation about using robots. For example, in Turkey, we have robots sold to Turkey airports from Russia, and they say, well, we'd better have a foreign-made solution, but the integrators should be local, should be Turkish, for example. And from this perspective, I think that I would agree with Albert's opinion that we should subsidize consulting, both industrial robotics and service robotics. And I always complain that we should help producers of bread or burgers. They need some robot to flip their burgers or to, well, blend their dough. And Maxim said that we should stop empty conversations. And I think we should discuss two things. We've been talking about creating specific jobs, specific money, and we said, give us that much money, and in 3-5 years we will receive that result. So who do you sell to? Well, we discussed it with Vladimir and with representatives of Ministry of Industry and Trade. Another story is that, well, let's have it. When we say that the government is not going to subsidize foreign-made robots, okay, so what? We can have foreign robots. It's better to have foreign-made robots which later on we can replace rather than to have nothing. So if I come to a plant and somebody says a foreign-made robot flips our burgers, and I can come with my own solution, and in my opinion we can start with foreign-made robots. And I liked what you are saying about tax exemptions. We should follow up this story, and all businesses, starting from civil engineer and construction, everybody will start implementing robots if they have tax exemptions. And Albert sometimes criticizes me for trying to work very fast, but actually I'm for working really fast. I don't think we are like super clever, but we can work real fast. And if we organize measures of support, and I will make a suggestion right now, if we work faster than our colleagues in the West or in Asia, that's going to be our success story. When I analyze different projects about robotics, they came not through venture capital funds or through support of the Ministry of Industry and Trade. Lots of robotics solutions were supported by business angels, and those business angels had not the first project, and they were ready to invest their money like tomorrow. That's working fast. So we should find such business angels with success stories, and they will give us money very fast, and we will just demonstrate them the direction of our desired work, and they will assess your support, they will value your support, I think. Just one more comment, a direct question. Are you ready to sit down and describe the money for consulting? Define what do you mean by consulting services and how a ministry or the Ministry of Trade and Industry can give money for consulting services. Well, I'm a startup, And even with my potential, even I can sell robots, and I conduct consulting in airports, in banks, and when we come, for example, to a museum and decompose their process, that's already a consulting service. So I think it is possible. We can do it. Well, the problem is to describe it. Albert, are you capable of describing what consulting is, defining what consulting is? Yes, I think we are ready. We are a large company, and we have lots of economists working for us, and we can actually fire some of them. We lack engineers rather than economists. But we should not replace the government here and fulfill their functions, because I think it's a complicated story over here, and somebody should produce robots and other people should work out policies. But I would like to follow up this business angel idea. The situations right now is absurd when people invest money on the initial stage knowing that there is not enough financing in Russia, and then they also are taxed on their investment, and that's absurd because they support our economy, they invest into our economy, and then they pay taxes from those monies. Yes, I think we should stimulate investments of those business angels, real investments when people pay cash to invest into a project. And I do not understand why the government subsidizes the sales of electric cars but does not subsidize the sales of robots. In a way, we have subsidies for electric cars, but it does not entail any input into our economy. They do not produce anything, while robots do produce something for our economy. They are used in our manufacturing industry, and I've got cognitive dissonance over here. I do not understand. While this is subsidized and that is not.
I will try to be very short, although I have written about 5 pages of questions, and I would like, I encourage this kind of activity. I would like to add ecological problem to that. Of course, we have to start with some legal approach. Of course, there is a risk of doing it, overdoing it, because we'll do some regulations, will be violated then, and then there will be punishment. But we have to stop at some objective point, and we have to understand the regulation sphere and the involvement of the government. And we don't want to bureaucratize this process. In my opinion, there is no choice. Whether we support the product for the external or internal market, domestic market, of course, on the external market, the product is either good or not, whether people buy or not it. And the shift is changed from the projection to production. And we know that colleagues have some ideas and experience, and the survey results demonstrate that. And we have a starting point. And answering Zurab's question, yes, we are ready to follow a different path, and we are ready to cooperate, and we do not substitute the government with ourselves. And we are ready to provide coordinating support, but we are and the role of the guarantee as well. And there is a question of regulation and consolidation of some common opinion and some tax system from inside. As for the forcing robotization, of course, nobody sets this kind of goal. We want to stimulate the demand by providing an opportunity to implement different technical decisions. We have some technical committees, but the work is not unified yet. And we invite you for cooperation in this field as well. And we have to be consciously tried the timeline to be finished by Innoprom and to discuss it face to face, to show it to you, and to discuss it from different points of view, and provide some statements. I think, I hope that this is a start of our work, and the numbers and figures and diagrams and graphs that we have seen today that will lead us to formulate plans and ideas, and we count on your support. And I'm ready to devote my free time to you. Thank you very much. Let's applaud. I would like to thank all the participants of this discussion. We have this first event which is visited by 3 departments of robotics. It's a significant step of government bodies and the community, robotics community. And there is a lot of work ahead, and we are happy to cooperate. Thank you.